fight it. But he decided, he ultimately started getting in all this trouble with the law and was told, next time we catch you, you're going to go to prison, or you need to leave, or you go to the military. So he decided to become a farm worker, and he left. And he went to California. And it didn't keep him out of trouble, but it set him on his path of discovery that would eventually lead him to prison, that eventually led him somewhere else, to transcend the walls, to transcend these identities, to become a very outspoken spokesperson for human rights here in the United States and abroad. And he was somebody who was internationally known. I could travel with this man anywhere in the world. I mean, literally, it seemed like I traveled a lot with him. And people would come up to him and know him. It was just amazing to me. This little bitty man who had such a powerful voice and such a sharp insight into the world. And so this book was about taking his writings in prison, his letters, his political protests, his diary when they had started a political riot in there, and they hold him up for several months. They would write. I mean, it was just amazing stuff. And so I felt like the world needs to see this because they see the transformation of a mind in progress. It gives you tremendous insight. And so I worked with a friend to get all of his papers purchased. And then, again, this is a young man. He owned a little bookstore called Mendoza, a bookstore in Austin. But basically, he was barely getting by with it. And we got Stanford University to buy his personal papers for $100,000. And it helped him. I mean, it helped him a lot, no doubt. They leveled the house. He did these things, because he would never bring home a salary. But more than that, it gave him the sense of like, wow, my life has been worthwhile. And I was fortunate enough to go to Stanford with him with the grant. And again, this is very rare. It's one thing to go and do some work. I took him with me, and we're sitting there looking at his stuff in the archives, having to barely touch it. And it's with a friend of mine who she had this idea. She wanted to publish a book talking about Latino language experiences. Like me, she didn't grow up bilingual, but we took something that maybe seems like very basic. Language shapes who we are in many ways. And we put out a call. We said we want to hear from the many, many perspectives of how it shaped your life. And we got a lot of stuff. I mean, the book could have been easily 3 or 4 times as long, but I was having trouble finding a publisher, so we went back to a couple of small presses. But this is called Telling Tongues, a Latino Anthology of Language Experience. And it's poetry, drama, short story, and a testimonial essay, people's firsthand creative nonfiction about their own life experience with language, in one way or the other. Some of it's in Spanish, some of it's in English, some of it's, and this is very pan-Latino in the sense that it's many, many different people from different backgrounds. And we have an introduction, and we each have our own testimonial in there about growing up and our relationship to language. The other thing, I'm actually working right now. When I said I took a year off a few years ago, one of the reasons that I came here, in addition to coming to a place where I figured, why leave Texas, where I can go and teach my Mexican Lit classes, and 95% of the people in my classes were Mexican. Here in the University of Minnesota, it's almost the opposite. I'm lucky to have 5 or 6 Latino students in my classes. But I thought, well, I wanted to come to Minnesota because it's a place of transformation. There's such a, Latinos are the fastest growing population. There's a lot going on. I wonder what it'd be like to go and be there and to play a role in helping make that transition possible, at least from the university perspective. And as head of a department of Chicano Studies, we built a department that's very engaged with the community in different ways. We have programs of outreach in the schools. We bring kids to campus. We do a number of things. And of course, if you think back to 2004 to 2007, 6, there was a lot of stuff going on with immigration. There were all those marches and streets a few years back, all this other stuff, as people were getting really angry around the country about immigration and all this change. So I would often get asked to go talk to people and help them understand what's going on in Minnesota and put this in the national context, put this in historical context. And one of the things that made it appealing also when I came was they said, look, if you work for 3 years, we'll give you a year off paid. And to do a research, to do a book. And I said, okay, that sounded great to me. It's like, so I had this year, but I had to come up with a book project. And I'd had some other literature projects, but part of me had also been wanting my own secret desire, decided to become an English major, was that I wanted to write, and I do write poetry, and I do write short stories, but I don't publish it much. I don't feel like I've really gotten adequate training, because when I took formal training, I often found that my teachers were trying to get me to write stereotypes about Latinos. They'd say, why don't you have a character do something like this, or be more more macho or something, you know, and I just, you know, it's not the kind of character I wanted to write, you know. So I just felt there was this cultural gap in terms of my teachers in the college. But nevertheless, I felt like I wanted to move my writing to be less scholarly, but it doesn't mean less intelligent. I just mean less formal scholarly and more coming from the heart, more creative. And so, you know, I put those two together. I thought, well, I want to write more creatively. I really want to do something, because in Chicano studies, I feel connected to what are the issues of the time, what is relevant about scholarship. And with all this stuff around immigration going on, I felt like I needed to write about that. And I would work with different immigrant rights groups. And I knew the complexities of things. I knew about the changes in the small towns, locally and nationally, that were going on that were scaring people. But I also knew Black people get along. And I knew basic information tells you that, in fact, except for Asian Pacific Islanders, Latinos marry outside of their culture more than anybody else. And what does that mean? It means that there are some people getting along, if you consider marriage getting along. You know, it's a level or another, right? And so I just knew that rather than the harsh polarization that you always saw in the news, you know, and Lou Dobbs and Chris Matthews and all these people that were just, you know, that was very anti-Latino sentiments, that the reality was much more complex, much more nuanced. So I set up how we work together to give people, to elevate people's voices, so that we understand the power of individual stories in making social change. So, I don't know, I've thrown out a lot at you. I'm sort of willing to stop there and take any questions. Again, I really want to be clear that this wasn't about me talking about me per se. I mean, what I wanted trying to convey is how my educational experience wasn't always well planned. Sometimes I fell into things. Sometimes I backed into things. Sometimes I, you know, resisted opportunities. I have no regrets because it all made me who I am. And at any point, my path could have gone a different way. And I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, almost at one point when I was frustrated trying to go to school, working 55 hours, not knowing how to juggle everything, I went to go sign up for the military thinking that's the answer. You know, I'm going to join, if I'm going to go to the military, I was very typical in Latino. If I'm going to go to the military, then I'm going to go to the Marines. You know, and I did all this stuff and passed the test, and I got really happy. But you know why I didn't go? And this is all accident of fate. When I was 10 years old, my brother hit me in the eye with a rock and detached my retina, and it's, you know, kind of messed up my vision in my left eye forever. And that, and he also, when I was like 11 or 12, he shot me in the chest with the pellet gun, and that it stayed in there. And twice I got stopped through that exam, and they were like, "Well, what happened to your eye?" And I explained to them, and they said, "Oh, that might," and that actually was the reason why I couldn't get in there for what I wanted to do. And I was smart enough for them, even though they were saying, "Well, join, we'll figure something out for you." I'm like, "No." And I'm glad I didn't, because, you know, later on I developed a very critical stance toward the military and toward what the United States does in Latin America. But at the time I was really too young to have a critique. And I thought, this is my way out. This is my opportunity. They'll pay for my education. And I'm glad, you know, I tell my brother, it's like, yeah, you know, they have screwed up my vision, but in many ways you kept me, you know, you kept me from making a mistake. You know, so. And it made the point that about 75% of all Latino professors went to community colleges. And I thought, wow, you know, I thought I was rare because somehow I went through this crooked path through higher education. And no, it turned out to be I was actually very normal, you know, in that sense.